I heard an audible voice, like a presence, and Dean, don't worry, I've got you. You're going to be fine.
Hey friend, welcome to the Find and Follow podcast, where we are all about helping you find and follow Jesus in your everyday life. Kyle and Scott are your hosts today. Okay, we've got guests with us who are learning the ways of the podcast. Dean and Nanette McMurtery are with us. And Dean is silencing his phone, ready to go now. Man, we should have gave you more pregame time. You should have covered it. At least you were not chewing any gum, right?
I thought about that on the way over here, too, that I was going to need to do that.
Yeah. No, it happens to all of us. So you guys are here. You're family. You're part of Mission Church, for those that don't know you. And we've had a lot of different guests on, a lot of people from outside of our immediate Mission Church family, which has been great. But then quite a few of them. And you guys have experienced something. We'll get into your story, a little triumph through tragedy and how it's impacted your faith just about 2 years ago. So I think it's going to be a good conversation and helpful. Question, though, and we've known each other for a while. I don't really know where you stand with Gonzaga basketball, though, because this is kind of a key thing for the podcast. And, I mean, it's not a deal breaker for us to continue the conversation. I mean, I know where you're at with the Seahawks, but I'm a little fuzzy on Gonzaga basketball because it's time to get on board. If you're not, this is championship year, so
I'm all in.
Okay, good.
Okay,
and I've heard this is the championship year.
This is
for several years now.
Well,
every year for Scott. Yeah,
there's always a championship to be had somewhere, somehow along the way. So, okay, good. Right.
Good,
not that it was a deal breaker.
Thing we got that covered.
It's truly the only basketball I watch because I'm not actually much of a basketball fan. But.
Yeah, that's great. Be a Gonzaga.
That's where I'm at. I'll watch the NBA in the finals, or honestly, if there's a Zag playing, I'll watch. But I can't stand the NBA, and I'll watch college because of the Zags, and then I'll watch March Madness. But yeah, I watch every single. I won't miss a game for the Zags, but I don't really watch anything else.
Yeah.
All right. Nanette, where are you at with sports and football and basketball? And
it's just on in my living room, so I have no choice. Every now and then I root for something or someone.
That's your grandchildren are playing.
Always my grandchildren. Yes.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing, which is perfect, right?
So you guys have been around at Mission Church for a long time. My first interaction with Dean was we played sports together.
Yeah,
really.
That I didn't know Dean, and Dean was the third baseman on our church softball league when it was probably
so many
2010, 2011. It was when I first got here. We
15 years ago.
Yeah, we had a church softball league, and Dean and I played together.
Well, two things I didn't know. I didn't know you ever played softball.
There you go.
What did you play?
I played like second base, and then I played a little in the outfield. We kind of switched around. But Dean was always solid.
Lindsay played first base.
Who did?
Lindsay.
My wife.
Yeah.
Was it slow pitch?
Yep.
Co-ed slow pitch?
Yep.
No way.
We had two.
Modified, wasn't it? Modified.
A little less arc on it?
Yeah, I don't remember now.
I think it was modified.
We had two Mission Church softball leagues. Or softball teams in the league. Yeah.
Co-ed team and a.
Huh. There you go.
Yeah.
Didn't even know. I played a little church league softball when I was in high school. I was back in the 90s with the Maribou Chapel, but it was before Maribou Chapel was Spokane Valley Foursquare. So that was way back. Cool. All right. It's good to get the sports team back together. All right. Let's go. Rah team. So when we have guests on, we just love to hear people's story of how you found Jesus originally. What's the short version for you, Dean, and how you found Jesus and your story of connecting?
Well, I grew up in a very non-religious home.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything about church or Jesus really or anything like that. I met her in 1975. I met her, and she was raised in the Catholic Church. So,
how old were you guys when you met?
18.
19.
When we met, we were 18.
Okay.
We were both working at Sizzler Steakhouse.
Yeah.
Oh, the Sizzler.
Up on the north side.
I love the Sizzler. There was one in the valley.
There was one.
There was one in the valley.
Go to all the time. They had the
We both
buffet.
ended up working there, too.
That was like the after sports game prime place to go was the Sizzler.
Oh man.
I love their toast. The bread.
Yes. It was thicker.
Yeah.
Right? Like a Texas toast. I remember on a vacation in Oregon one time, and I was still pretty young, but the Sizzlers were gone. And then we were going, I think it was in Bend, and we were like, there's a Sizzler here. We're going to the Sizzler tonight. It was still, I don't know if it was good, but we went. So, all right.
So anyway, we started dating when we were working there, and ended up married and pregnant. Married and pregnant. In 76, we got married. Brian was born in 77. But I mean, in order for her to get married in the Catholic Church, I had to learn something about, at least about the Catholic religion,
Right.
and what they believed and stuff. So I went through some classes and stuff, and I mean, I got baptized because I had to be baptized for us to get married in the church. So anyway, we did that. Got married and ended up with 4 boys in a short few years. And after about 7, and we did go to church. We took the kids to Catholic church. But I mean, I was there for her. You know, there was no relationship with the Lord at all. After about 17 years of marriage, we didn't like each other very much. And we separated, and we're actually going through a divorce. And I started doing some counseling with the head pastor, a senior pastor up at Northview Bible Church. And Ron Miller he led me to the Lord and prayed for me, and I accepted Jesus up there. It didn't really catch all that well, but I mean, I did.
Stick.
Well, just as far as how God's transforming you and your
Right.
practices. So how did you get connected to him, to Ron?
Well, we had gone to church up there a little bit because my brother and sister-in-law went to church there.
Okay.
So
you kind of get to this crisis point. And you're like, hey, I
Yeah,
need some help.
yeah.
Who am I going to reach out
he's
to?
really the only person I knew that I could really talk to. And so I did. And the Lord put us back together after, I don't know, 9 or 10 months maybe. Decided divorce isn't what we said we wanted to do when we got married. We didn't, we made a promise to our kids and to the Lord and our friends and family that we'd stay married until we died. So
That's so romantic.
I know.
Well, it's very admirable, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that's courageous.
It's a commitment. Yeah.
And to do the work to go through that's hard. A lot of times people's stories are like, yep, and that's when we went separate.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
So when we did that, we renewed our vows and everything, and we decided that the Catholic Church wasn't
Fulfilling our needs.
It wasn't fulfilling our needs. Yeah, it was. There was some things about them that we just felt like we were hungry for something else. So we started checking out different churches, Northview being one. And by that time, I think were we living in Wenatchee?
No.
I don't remember
We
when.
moved to Spokane.
Were we? Okay. Anyway, so that's when I met the Lord and started. But I did, again, it didn't really catch all that. Not like anything like it is now. I was a Christian. I would call myself a Christian, but like a lot of Christians or a lot of people that claim to be Christian don't have a relationship really with God.
Yeah, and it's everybody's story as far as growing in our desire for God.
Yep.
And sometimes we see in other people's lives and it seems to go quicker. In others, it's more of a slow journey. But again, that's all of life is a constant everyday waking up. Like, what am I going to choose today?
Yep.
And where's my
What color
desire?
shoes?
Where's my pursuit?
Yeah.
And so for you, Nanette, what's your take on that experience? Your guys' story as far as?
We were very young when we got married, so we basically grew up together. We had different models in our lives. Dean's family and my family were totally opposite. There wasn't a volume, I would say, in our home. My mother was, she was strict. My dad was very quiet. If Dad spoke, we all stopped. So there wasn't a lot of fighting, that kind of thing. So I guess Dean learned one way to handle emotions and circumstances, and I learned a different way. So you bring into your marriage what you grew up with. And I think for a lot of our life, we never knew how to communicate. So I was busy raising 4 boys. He was busy working to support us. And so, we never connected in our marriage. I don't believe. I mean, I think that would be my story for that.
The kids were the glue. There was not a lot of like she says, communication, definitely, but there wasn't a lot of relationship between us either. If it wasn't for the kids, I don't think we would have made it.
Gotcha. Yeah. But it's grown beyond just for the kids.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about that part.
So let's talk about that part.
Because
life went along for a while, pretty well. We just kind of did what we needed to do, and we ended up landing here in our church search, and so then I felt like I was growing more, and learning and just processing with people, and but we still were not real connected. So 2015, some life happened again, and we ended up apart. So
I always forget about that part.
Oh yeah, there's that.
I was dealing with some issues for my own self, and I needed to take care of those. So anyway, so we ended up apart. And again, it was, choices he was making, mostly anger issues, that kind of thing. And I wasn't willing to continue to be in that situation. So I went through counseling. I got my issues under control, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and then we were apart for a time to figure it out. He needed to figure out his thing. I needed to figure out mine. And so then we started counseling together, and obviously we worked through that. Mm-hmm. And so our marriage began to grow because we started to learn how to communicate.
In that season there, was it on the front end that you guys were that intentional, that aware of like, hey, we need to separate to work on our stuff, but was still with the desire to get back together? And I know it's usually a mixed bag of things. And
it was a mixed bag, but yeah, our intention was not to divorce.
But recognizing, hey, we need to have a little bit of space here to be able to work on some stuff. It's
kind of like when your kids are little and they're fighting, it's like you go to your room, you go to your room, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. Mm-hmm. So that was how
it became that. That was not my understanding at the very front of that, but yeah, it certainly became that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I did have issues I needed to work on. She's right. I grew up in an angry family, a lot of fighting, and it was in your face fighting. I had a great. And my parents are going to watch this. So.
Yeah.
And they know, we had a great family life. I had a great growing up life. Mom was a stay-at-home mom, never worked, and never drove even until I was an adult and married and gone. Mom never drove. So Dad was a salesman on the road pretty much 5 nights a week. And when he was home, he was there and present and coached Little League and did all that kind of stuff. We spent a lot of time camping. To this day, Priest Lake's my favorite place on earth. So, yeah, I mean, it was a good youth, but there were issues with anger and with, it was loud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I brought into the marriage. That's how I knew how to deal with stuff. So,
yeah, and I think again we all do that, and again, there's all sorts of factors, right? I remember premarital counseling, and Lindsay and I were really young when we got married, and that was the first thing our premarital counselor asked us was like, "Hey, how did your parents fight?" Or, are your parents still together? And they gave us like homework to like talk to our parents. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, why does it matter? That's not me. And I love my parents, but I was at a point in my life, like I think every teenager gets to, where it's like I'm so different than my family, and they didn't follow Jesus. And I'm like, well, I got Jesus, and that doesn't affect it, lady. Why are you asking me about my family? And then I like actually came to and started realizing everything about. They wanted to know, how did your parents show affection? How did your parents, argue? And I was like, why does that matter? Well, that's not all you've ever seen, but that's 90% of where you get your how do people argue? How do husband and wife argue? How do husband and wife show affection? Or do they have some time to do, how do they talk? And so it's super important. And if we don't deal with those things, and so you guys doing that, once you got married, again, when we're young, we're like, that doesn't matter, and all that kind of stuff. That's why I always talk to couples who are, to some sort of premarital counseling or some sort of thought process before to think through those things, because it's going to come up. Mm-hmm. And when it comes up and how it comes up is different for everybody. But
and I just have to throw out there, I mean, our marriage wasn't all horrible.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there were the issues, but we also had a lot of time with our kids. Yeah. Camping was our thing. It's their thing.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of good years. There just was underlying issues that just never got resolved.
Right.
And it sounds like, again, with the Jesus piece and with the marriage piece and all of these stuff, you guys figuring out all of that obviously goes together. And so as you journey in your relationship with Jesus, like Dean, like you mentioned, he's there, but I'm not really allowing him to dictate who I am and how I'm living and following after him. And we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount on church on Sundays, right? And Jesus is pretty clear in there. It's like, yeah, you can listen to this stuff and you can come to church and you can do all this stuff, but that's not what I'm after, right? I'm after actually letting me define your life and define your priorities and your ethics and all of these types of things. And so as you guys journey through life, and I think there's a lot of people's story, right? There's a church thing there, or a God thing there, or a Jesus thing there, but what does that actually look like for how I live my life, how I treat my wife, how I treat my kids, how I, we talked about it this lesson, how do I use my stuff, what do I think about, what do I talk about, what do I spend my time doing, all that kind of stuff. And so as you guys journeying through different seasons of life like we all do, going, hey, what does this mean for our marriage? And then obviously where you guys sit today, Jesus has a hold of a lot more than he did when you first got married. And even in those seasons where you're going, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, whatever that looks like. No, like I actually allow Jesus to have say in my life. I actually allow Jesus to define my life. I actually go to him to lead my life and all of those types of things. And I think for all of us, it's this journey of life, right? And there's lots of steps in there and how that works. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that you guys apparently brought from your growing up families, and Dean, your family, is like there's a commitment, there's a loyalty. Right. You guys kept working through the good times and through the bad times. We're going to keep working on ourselves and making a commitment to each other and learn to communicate and learn to continue to grow.
And let me just throw in there that, I mean, I say that my family and my parents argued a lot and stuff like that. They've also been married for almost 70 years now.
That's impressive.
So they're in their mid-80s, and they will celebrate their 69th anniversary this year.
Wow. So, yeah. That's
God willing.
That's special. So, yeah. Amy's grandparents, we just celebrated their 70th this last weekend. Yeah. And it's a commitment.
Yeah.
And resiliency. Yeah. And again, your guys' story, as I hear it, is we're having these moments, everyday real life stuff that everybody experiences. Where are we going to turn to find help and support through that? And it, over and over, it kept being your guys' faith in God. And so how you journey to get there is different for everyone, but where else do we go to get wisdom and provision and support, which is really, really evident almost 2 years ago, as you guys had a tragic accident that, from my seat, you guys have triumphed through and are still walking through. But from my take, it was a Sunday morning, and it was just a few minutes into our gathering, and someone came to me. I think it was Gordon. Gordon came to me and said, Dean and Nanette have been in an accident, and we got to pray for them. And it's one of those, in the moment, trying to absorb what I'm being told with a little more detail, and I'll let you guys explain all that. But then also we have this gathering, and it's happening, and I'm like, what do we do? And trying to absorb what? On a personal level, but then how do we respond? And so I was literally headed out the stage in a couple of seconds and try to make this decision yep, here we go. And so just quickly kind of communicated the story, and then we prayed for you guys, and we're trying to get real-time updates. But let's talk about that morning. You guys were getting up, getting ready, and coming to church.
Yes.
Beautiful Sunday morning, 8 degrees.
No, it was 5.
Oh, whatever. I know it was cold.
It was very cold.
But it was a gorgeous day. I mean, it was really, the sun was out and stuff, and we were just on our way here, and we were at a stoplight up at Sullivan and the freeway interchange up there, and light turned green for me to go, and I was first in line, and I hit the gas and started across the intersection, and young lady ran a red light, full bore. I mean, she never touched her brakes, never slowed down, and hit us, fortunately, kind of behind where Nanette sits. But I mean, if she'd have been an eighth of a second sooner, she would have plowed right into her door. And but she hit. It was a smaller car, and I had a half-ton pickup, so she kind of got underneath the rear of the truck and lifted it up a little bit, and I still had a little bit of forward momentum, and over the truck went on its side and slid for, 15 yards maybe. After it was on its side, it slid. And we came to a stop, and
it was all actually very quick.
It seemed to me like it took forever for the truck to roll.
Really?
Yeah, but I'm sure it was not very long.
Yeah, milliseconds.
Yeah.
And you guys are both conscious through the whole thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I said to her, hang on, we're going over. And we ended up at a stop, and I looked up, and she's right there. And,
I'm suspended from the seatbelts. Seatbelts work.
Yes.
They held me in place.
Yeah, and she was trying to call 911, and it wasn't working.
No.
She wasn't getting through. And I noticed that my glass in my door window was gone, and I saw my phone. First of all, I felt absolutely nothing when the truck went over. I just thought, we're laying on our side, and I looked out by where the rearview mirror or the side mirror used to be, and my phone was laying there. My phone fell out, and I went to reach for it, and I had nothing to reach with. My left arm was completely gone, and I told her, just as calm as could be, I said, I think I lost my arm. And she said, no, honey, you're just laying on it. I said, and about that time I saw the blood, and said, no, it's gone. So
it was just bizarre because I'm like frantically trying to call 911, and I'm hanging from the seatbelt.
And by that time, some guys were trying to get.
They were trying to come in to get us out.
They had climbed up on the truck, opened her door, and were trying to get her seatbelt cut and get her out of there.
Just people that had seen the accident.
Just a passerby.
Yeah, passersby or whatever.
And he's just sitting there. Yeah, my arm's gone.
That's unreal.
Like,
it doesn't.
like-
it doesn't sound real as you're sharing
It
that.
There was absolutely no. I mean, it was totally gone. There was only a tiny, from what the doctors and the paramedics said, a little tiny piece of skin holding it on there. And it actually, as it turns out, it was. She walked around the truck, and the arm was underneath the truck.
His
behind
hand was
me,
like his
and
hand
just
was
the
holding
hand
the
was
truck.
sticking out.
Oh
on
my god!
Yeah, it was pretty traumatic.
I
So-
bet.
For me.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure to
for
see
her.
that.
He never saw that.
No,
Correct.
No,
But and what are you feeling, Dean?
nothing.
At this,
I mean, I
No
had
pain?
no pain whatsoever. I never felt it come off. Yeah.
are you in shock? Do you think?
Well,
I mean, to what level of
Probably.
shock?
that's
I
what
guess.
people
Gotta be.
tell
I mean,
me.
Yeah.
Probably.
I think I was probably in shock because, I mean, come on.
Yeah, for sure. But to have that kind of clarity of mind and voice, to not be panicking,
Yeah.
like that's a different level of shock than what I've experienced when
Right.
I broke a few bones and had traumatic experiences. Not
Yeah.
like that, but yeah,
and he
it's
was
usually a little
trapped
nuttier.
in the car. He,
Yeah, I couldn't.
You were pinned with
he was
the
pinned
vehicle.
in the car. Yeah.
So what happens next? So do you
Well-
climb out, Nanette? Or
Well, a man. I have no idea who this man was, but
Yeah.
anyway, so he came in and actually stood on the center console, and they lifted me up so then you could unhook the seatbelt.
Right,
Then
okay.
and then they lifted me out. By that time, the firemen were there, all the people were there, and so I was out. Then I'm on the outside, watching.
and
all
you're
of
obviously
this.
shook, but you're physically okay.
I'm physically okay.
You're not like
yes.
injured or bleeding. Or
No. So I'm physically fine, but I'm, processing the.
distraught. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I called my friend who was at here.
Yes.
It's like, we're going to be late for church.
Right.
No, I mean, not like that. But I
Correct.
mean, I just called her and I just said,
This just happened.
this just happened and Dean's trapped and I don't know what's going to happen.
And at this point, are you aware that have you come to the grips like his arm is gone? Are you
yes.
okay.
Yeah. There was an immense amount of blood.
Okay.
On the So, yeah. So then, just all things started happening, the chaos of trying to get him out and
stabilize because obviously bleeding and
Right.
nobody knows what's exactly happening. So
And I
it
had
took
called-
them a while to figure out how they were going to even get me out of the truck.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a slight person,
yeah.
and
So what did they end up doing?
they covered me with blankets and tried to smash out the windshield. And well, they did tear out the windshield, but then they realized pretty quickly they weren't going to get me over the steering column and through that way. So they ended up getting the whatever they call
Jaws
it,
of life.
jaws of life or whatever, and cut the roof
so
off
they
the truck.
they literally cut the truck in half.
Like a
and-
can opener.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
And while I was hanging there, first of all, it seemed to me like the paramedics and all that took forever.
I bet.
And I'm laying there, and I don't remember whether they'd gotten there yet or not. I think they had, and we're starting to try to figure out. Well, I overheard one of the firemen say, "We need to get a tourniquet on him," and they said, "There's no way to get a tourniquet on him. There's not enough there to
tourniquet.
we
to
can't
turn?
wrap it.
To
We can't
kid?
get anything
I'm not
on
sure
it."
how you say that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's not enough
you're
meat
still
to grab.
that's the side you're laying on, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I kept, I was fairly calm because, again, I was in no pain. And I kept thinking, and I'm watching blood pour out of my arm or my shoulder. And I'm thinking this whole time, you hear about and watch
movies.
TV shows and different things like that, and people that are in traumatic situations like that, and if they're near death, they start to feel cold. They want to go to sleep, close their eyes. I never got cold. But I was thinking, that's coming. Because I've lost a lot of blood here. I'm liable to pass out. And about that time that I started thinking that, I just felt this comfort in the truck. And it was, I heard an audible voice, and it wasn't like a male voice speaking per se, but there was like a presence and a voice that said, Dean, don't worry, I've got you, you're going to be fine.
Yo.
And it's just, wow, that's, I'd never heard that before.
Right.
And
did you know that it was God speaking
I
to you?
knew immediately that was something other than one of the firemen or something like that. It was, I knew it was God.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a moment.
And for the rest of the time, I mean, it changed my life. It was definitely life-changing.
And so you have this crazy supernatural peace about you in one of the most tragic moments.
Yeah.
And this is taking a while.
Yeah.
Smashing out a window, cutting the truck roof open, like those don't just happen. So this is you are there in it, and you're conscious through the whole thing, and you're fully aware, and you're having this moment with God that Jesus is our comforter. He's going to send the comforter, the Spirit of God, and peace of God that transcends and goes beyond any circumstances. And here you are experiencing that.
Yeah, it was incredible.
So how did they get you out of the truck?
Now, once they got the roof off, they were able to just, of course, come in and they couldn't cut the seatbelt until, they knew I wasn't going to flop over.
Yeah, right. Where's this guy rolling to?
Yeah.
Right. Brace yourself, Dean. You're like, well, I only got one side here.
So they cut the roof off, and I think they cut the door off as well, or forced it all the way back to the back as far as they could.
They had also braced the truck up.
Oh, yeah. So, because that's one of the first things they did. They don't want, while they're working on
it roll.
They don't want it rolling anymore.
Yeah.
So, and all this time, my arm is still laying back
there under the truck.
Yeah, don't step on that.
Oh my gosh.
For those that don't know you, like, you love a good joke, and I love a good joke, and there's so many good jokes in this whole thing, but we're trying really hard to be mature and sensitive about this situation.
So anyway, they were able to get one of the board things
right
in there and then underneath me and strapped me to it. They strapped just my upper body to it. My feet weren't on it or anything.
But to help kind of lift you out, slide you out. Yeah.
Got me out of there and onto a gurney.
So you're out of the truck, and again, your arm's under the truck, waving at you. I've never heard that part of the story.
A lot of people haven't.
Sometimes we don't share every detail of the story.
Rightfully so, yeah.
Yes, I get that, but now I got that visual again, the jokes and the things, and so I'm working through it. So, anyways, but then you're in this crisis moment too, where you've lost a ton of blood, and then I'm sure they're trying to evaluate: is the arm salvageable? Can we reattach it? What do we do? So. What was the decision there, and what happened next?
Well, they got me into the ambulance and got me to the hospital.
Tell them about the ride to the
ambulance. Oh yeah. So on the ride to the hospital, and quite honestly, an ambulance. It's my first trip in one. They're not the smoothest riding things in the world, and it was kind of a little bit bumpy, and I kept feeling this pressure on my chest. And was starting to have trouble breathing. And I thought somebody was like leaning over me or, had their arm on my chest or something. And I kept complaining, asking them, please don't lay on my chest like that. And finally, one of the paramedics kind of leaned down and whispered into my ear, that's your arm laying on your chest. I promise you, we're not leaning on your chest. That's your arm. Oh my. And
Kyle, are you okay?
No, I just think it's hilarious. I mean, it's just, we just threw your arm on top of you.
Yeah. So anyway, we get to Sacred Heart, and that was one of the first things in the trauma center that they wanted to know from me was, did I want we could fly you over to Harborview in Seattle, and they can try to reattach your arm, but quite honestly, there's not much left there. And I said, look, if it's just something that's going to be hanging off of my shoulder that I can't utilize in any way, if I sit down at the table, I got to pick it up with my right hand and put it on the table. If it's not usable in any way, shape, or form, no, I don't want. Just let's don't do that. So they didn't, and they agreed that it was going to be pretty useless. So I went into surgery, and that's the last thing I remember for a while because they put me under pretty quick. So
there was a lot of other things going on, that I don't think he
was aware of.
I mean, there was a lot.
Yeah,
You think about the trauma. I mean, there was people in and people out, and doctors consulting, and all this kind of stuff. And he had lost a lot of blood, and so he was also getting a transfusion. Well, because he had lost a lot of blood, his kidneys were shutting down. So there was that situation on top of the other. So there was some medical crises happening that I don't think he was. I think he was a little oblivious to it.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of those where the call goes out overhead at the ER. Like, here comes Dean, and this is a serious. Like, any available personnel come now because this is
the
life-threatening.
codes.
Yeah.
The codes. And I wasn't there. When he got to the hospital, a lot of it I wasn't there for. My son came. He didn't live very far away, and unfortunately locked his keys in the car.
I remember that.
At the scene to help to pick you up and then take you.
So my son's a police officer, so he's supposed to be calm under pressure, right?
Yeah. Except for when it's his parents.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's not really an officer at that point. He's a son.
It was really cold, so he did leave his car running and shut the door, but didn't have a spare key in his pocket.
Oh.
So there was a little bit of a delay for me getting there to the hospital because he had to call a buddy.
Right.
Apparently, there's universal keys to police cars, but
this is like who are we selling the movie rights to is what I want to know. Like, it's got everything. It's got action. It's got comedy. It's got drama. Let's go. Who's Disney going to give us call somebody?
Somebody.
This is.
But it's for me there was in the moments there was calm because I was I tend to shut myself down, my body down, to process and to get it done. And I had called Kathy, and all I can remember from that conversation is, you need to breathe. You need to breathe. She kept telling me to breathe, and I'm like, why are you telling me to breathe?
Right.
But obviously I was needing to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so there was that, that calm from there, the comfort from my son. And anyway, and it's like, in that moment, I didn't have what he had. I mean, I didn't have, God saying, oh, I've got him, and I'm just trying to figure out who's got him, And the thoughts going through my head are, is he going to survive this? So there was moments where I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of different things that we could talk about. I think one of the things that I'm most curious about is just that kind of incident, again, in your guys' story. It's like, where are you going to go to find help and support? And so how has that tragedy really helped you guys triumph in helping your faith grow?
Well, I just think that, having that interaction with God in the truck changed my whole perspective on whether I was saved or not. I pretty much understood at that moment that, well, like he said, he has me. I'm his. And I don't know, my whole attitude seemed to change about a whole lot of different stuff. In the hospital, well, for anybody that doesn't know, if you have an amputation, you have a lot of sensations and phantom issues going on. And in the hospital the first night, I was laying in bed. I was watching a movie on my phone, Secretariat. And I felt a spider crawling up the back of my left arm. I mean, it was so plain to me that there was something crawling from my wrist all the way up the back of my arm. And I kept going like this to try to brush it away. But I just thought it was comical, you know. At that time, they hadn't put me on any kind of medications for the phantom pain. They were just trying to keep my actual pain level down. So that night, well, late at night, one of the nurses came in, and she was a young gal. I didn't get her name. I wish I had of, because I'd like to talk to her again, because we had a conversation, and she came in. She says, I've been wanting to come in and talk to you. I keep hearing from the other nurses on the floor about your attitude, what you've been going through, and how, you know,
Basically
you seem to be
positive.
all right. Yeah, you're very positive about it and stuff. And I said, well, and I told her the story about what happened in the truck. And we started talking, and I asked her, I said, are you a believer? And she says, well, I know there's a God. She said, but I said, do you have a church you go to? And no, I don't go to church. And she said, when I was really young, I had an aunt tell me that I was evil and I was never going to amount to anything and that I was going to hell. And it just broke my heart. And I started talking to her, and that's up until that point, I was unlike me to get into a religious discussion with somebody, but I felt sorry for her. Somebody telling you that, and we hugged, we cried, I prayed for her, and it was kind of a neat, it was a really neat interaction. So my whole attitude through the whole thing has just been really, yeah, it happened, it's bad, it's not good, there's a whole lot of stuff I can't do. But there's a whole lot of stuff I've learned that I can do without it. And my golf game sucks, but I still play. And
yeah,
that's yeah.
Just again, I think the way everything is, all the conversations that we're having fitting together, and to Scott's point is, hey, what is this tragedy thing in your life going to point you to, right? Even, marriage struggles and conflict and, strife and anger and all that kind of stuff, to, separation, to this huge life event that changes everything about your day-to-day life. I mean, I remember, the first few times you're coming back, just like, man, you got to relearn life, and changes the dynamic and then the trauma of what actually happened and the memories and all that kind of stuff. And okay, what's this going to do? This, to Scott's point, this could send us in one way, being mad at God and frustrated with life and why me and why did this happen to me? And to the nurse's point, 9 out of 10 people that sit in their bed are angry and frustrated and pissed off and just want to be home, and they're mean to the nurses and they're like, I don't have an arm, and they're just, lamenting that, and just, I can only imagine, right? Like and to get this guy that's like, yeah, this sucks. Like, I'm not happy this happened, but I'm not going to be mad at God. I'm not going to sit here and wallow and have this like, woe is me and pissed off attitude. They're just like, this is different.
Well, don't get me wrong. I had a few pity parties.
Well, yeah.
Sitting on the edge of the bed, and looking at it, and it brought me to tears a few times.
Oh, absolutely.
But again, surprisingly, the Lord has kept most of the pain away. I still have the phantom stuff. I'm on some pretty hefty medications for that. But yeah, it's I got over it, the pity parties, pretty quick, and just started getting on with life. And there's been a whole process of, well, first of all, dealing with lawyers, and a prosthesis. I started relatively quickly up process of getting a prosthesis, but it turns out I had so little left up there that all I could do was open and close a hand. And for me, I can do a lot with my right hand. I don't use it. I mean, I don't wear it. But we are in the process right now. We were over in Seattle last weekend at Harborview, talking with surgeons and stuff over there. And in fact, this afternoon I'm going to call over there and schedule a surgery over there. It's a long surgery. It's about 6 hours, 5 to 6 hours. And I mean, one of the hesitations that I've had is because one of the first things I asked them, what's the process? What are you going to do? And they said, well, first we got to pretty much remove your shoulder. And I'm like, oh, okay.
What? I need you. Wait, I'm out. I need that. You're going to put it back, or
Time out.
I'm tired of losing things here.
But there's a process that, in fact, I have had one other surgery on it here in Spokane to try to accomplish this, but it was unsuccessful. It's called nerve reintervention. And they get the nerves that are still in there that originally controlled my fingers, controlled my wrist, controlled my elbow, all that kind of stuff. They're still in there. She could not access them because they had retracted too far into my chest. And she came in from the back side of my shoulder. So now I'm going to go over and have surgery over in Seattle, and they'll come in through the front of my chest and also through the back. So they're going to open me up quite a bit.
Wow.
And what they do is they get those nerves and get them reattached to different muscles. And then I can, with a different prosthesis, I can activate muscles that will turn my wrist or work my elbow or different things like that. So
crazy.
Wow. That's like
medicine is just
unreal. That's like half medicine, half engineering, half robotics.
Sci-fi.
It's a lot of that stuff.
even just like you mentioned, when you showed me on a Sunday morning, even just the opening and closing, like that's to me is amazing. Like you don't have an arm there, and something up here, and this guy up here can tell this other thing. I'm like, even that. Like, so you're talking about doing all of this with. I don't understand how I can do even
and
this.
it may not. Be totally successful, but if I can get more, if I could get the capability of turning my wrist,
wow,
I'd be super happy.
Yeah.
I would really like to be able to work the elbow, but we'll see. I mean, that's all in God's hands.
If we go back real quick to the hospital that first night, and again, it's the light and love of Jesus shining through you hours after a horrific thing. That it spreads through the hospital going, there's something different about this guy over in room such and such. Like, you got to go see him because you won't believe it. And that's Jesus shining through you.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's when Jesus walked the earth, they would be like, hey, we're not sure a whole lot about this guy, but you got to come see. And you having that moment with God speaking to you that he's got you and he's going to take care of you. Nanette, from your vantage point and your experience, like, how has going through this helped you, your faith, your guys' faith, your relationship as a couple?
So I was honestly quite worried about which way he was going to go. I mean, you could become an angry, horrible person, or you can do what he did. And so there was, that for me. And so I've been somewhat amazed at where his faith has grown, his attitude. So it surprises me, sometimes. It's like, who is this guy? Yes, I don't remember this guy. And he says thank you a lot, Because literally he depends on me for a lot of things.
Yeah.
So for me, it was in those moments, it was like, my faith grew just watching him process his life. I've had to process a lot, for myself. And so I find myself at times, of course, I had my times as well. Why? Why did this happen? And I don't know that I'll ever get the answer to why, but I have seen the blessings along the way, the way that people have come around and rallied for support, just the smallest little things that have happened to us. People have provided things for us to make our life easier. Just simple, different ways to do things. There's in the grand scheme of things, we went through a lot of stuff, and I'm not going to discount what we walked through in our marriage, because those days were hard. But he's still here with me, and he's a whole person, and that's only God has provided that for me.
Yeah. A real sense of gratitude is what I hear from you guys. And, this episode coming out around Thanksgiving, and just the gratefulness as the reality of life and death is right at your front door. And to be able to be here to share your story so transparently and vulnerably is the grace of God. It's amazing.
I know you didn't want to talk today, but you've done your fair share. You want to tell this? Do we have time?
Well, all we have is time. Okay. This thing just keeps going and going.
Tell the story about Lindsay's parents, Lindsay's mom.
Oh, yeah.
That was something else too.
So, a few weeks after we had started coming back to church and stuff, Rebecca had come up to me and she goes, "I have this Bible verse." I guess I should have pulled it up, but she goes, "A lady in the church wanted you to have this." And I read it, and it was talking about overcoming death, basically. And anyway, and I read it, and I'm just, so then Rebecca begins to tell me the story that this woman, whom I didn't know, God had told her the night before our accident that she needed to pray. She didn't know why or for whom, but she needed to pray. And to pray specifically this, verse. And anyway, so she had come out of service and was sitting in the foyer facing the doors, praying for whatever God, I don't know how she prayed, but anyway, so she was obedient in God having her pray for something that she didn't know. It's like, you get this thing, it's like, somebody has a situation, so you pray, "Oh, God, take care of it," kind of thing. So anyway, so as it turns out, she was praying at the time that Kathy had gotten my phone call, and then realized what God had her pray for. So she was praying for us. A woman I didn't know in the church, who happens to be your mother-in-law, by the way, was praying for us at the time. And for me, that is God ordained. It's not something that happens every day.
Right. No, that's the beauty of God at work in community. For her to be praying for one of your first things is to call your friend for help. And your family, your son, and just the beauty of us doing life together. And I think there's a lot of things that we could continue to talk about here, but we do need to land the plane on this podcast episode. And it's one of those things I hope, as everyone is listening, as you're listening in, to go to not compare our stories is kind of the default, but to go, things that we're all going through are hard and difficult, whatever it may be. It can be a work situation, a different relationship situation. But hopefully for you listening, that you'd get encouraged to go, where else am I going to turn to? To find life and the source of life, and for hope and joy and a peace that transcends all things in all situations. And so that, let's put our faith in Jesus, and He's our provider. Dean and Nanette, as you guys walk through this with the hope and the upbeatness and the cheerfulness and the optimism, is remarkable. It's beyond natural.
Yeah. And beyond that again, that moments like this, tragic stuff, and even stuff that, to your point, Scott, doesn't feel as quote unquote tragic, and that's not as big a deal when we compare. Like, there is a point that they can pivot us one way or the other. We could be sitting here telling a story about how this like rocked your faith and you questioned Jesus and you stopped going to church and you got your marriage, unraveled and all that kind of stuff, right? Like that, and people would go, yeah, like kind of understandable, right? Like,
that seems like logical. That
like
would
why
happen.
You're angry at God, you're angry at each other, and
And you hear of that happen.
yeah. And again, we're 2 years down the road, and we go, and people would go, yeah, like I kind of get it, right? But the opposite, to go, wait, how does this horrific, tragic accident, how do we sit here on the other side going, my faith is stronger, our marriage is stronger, I'm doing better? It's like, that's Jesus, right? Like that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I've always, it's come to my thought, into my brain, thinking, I don't know what I'm saying, thought process that there's a saying that God doesn't give us more than we can handle. And I kind of have changed that in my mind, that God doesn't give us anything that He can't handle.
Yeah, for sure.
And
I always hated
I know
that.
people go through things that a whole lot worse than what we went through. But I'm thankful to God that I'm here, and thankful she's here and wasn't hurt.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know,
it could have
the
been.
most
It
bizarre
could have been
thing,
worse.
He's laying on the table, getting a blood transfusion. His arm's gone. He's like, "Are you okay? I'm so glad you're okay."
Wow.
Yeah.
That
Let's
speaks
talk
volume.
about you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you.
Well, that speaks volume to who you
Yeah.
guys are and
Yeah.
care for one another. And so,
So thank you for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
Being
Yeah.
committed to.
Thanks for the coffee.
There you
oh,
go.
you bet. Yeah. Well, we're grateful. We're honored for your guys' transparency and willingness to share. And I know I'm encouraged and have more hope today because of hearing your guys' story. And I'm sure those listening are the same. So thank you again. We appreciate you being on
It's
the
our
podcast.
pleasure. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Have a great week following Jesus. We'll catch you on the next one.